A pleasant evening to everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to extend to you a very warm welcome on this wonderful day. Before we start the session, I would like to give some general instructions to the audience. So, the audience are requested to mute your audio and video once you join the Zoom platform, and joining by using connection to the audio. Participants are requested to join the meeting before 15 minutes of time. Entry to the Zoom platform will be allowed for 500 participants on the first come served basis. Attendance link cum feedback link for day 1 will be posted only in the chat box after 8:15 p.m. Attendance link will not be shared in WhatsApp or Telegram group. Session will be live streamed on YouTube and the link will be shared. Questions can be asked only in the chat box of Zoom or YouTube comment box. Thank you. I would like to invite Mrs. A.S. Radha Ma'am, Head and Assistant Professor of English, Sri Parasakthi College for Women, Courtallam, to deliver the welcome address. Ma'am, please.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Please proceed.
Good evening, one and all. It's a great honor for me to deliver the welcome address on this wonderful occasion, that is 1 week international webinar series. First of all, with a thankful heart, I would like to welcome our secretary, Mr. A.T. Paranjodi, chief patron of this program. He has been our guiding force, support to all the activities carried out in the department. Welcome you, sir. I welcome patron of this program, Dr. R. Jainila Sundari, our principal, whose appreciation, support, and positive vibration has a great impact in molding the growth of our department. Welcome you, ma'am. I would like to welcome two guest speakers of today, Professor Elisabetta Marino, University of Rome, Italy, who is going to speak on Women on Vigilant Killer, Exploring Film Narratives, and Dr. Sujatha Menon, Senior Assistant Professor, Sastra, deemed to be University, Thanjavur. It is my ardent pleasure to welcome our organizing secretary, coordinators, organizing committee members, student coordinators. Your hands, your faith, courage of conviction, vibrant spirituality, determined efforts to take up the missions, make all our dreams come true. Welcome you all. It's my pleasure to extend a gracious and intensive welcome to all our eminent professors, teachers, scholars, student participants from parts of India and abroad. Welcome one and all. Before winding up my welcome address, I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks to all the resource persons who acknowledged our invitation. I'm sure that you will feel enriched with knowledge after the completion of this program. I welcome each and everyone to have a splendid time with us. Welcome one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to call upon our Honorable Principal, Dr. R. Jainila Sundari, ma'am, Sri Parasakthi College for Women, Courtallam, to deliver the presidential address. Ma'am, please.
Good evening, everybody. The only way to find the limits of what is possible is by going beyond them and making sure that nothing is impossible. Everything is easy when you are crazy about it. I appreciate our Department of English and Research Center head, organizing secretary, coordinators, student coordinators, and all other organizing committee members in arranging this 1 week international webinar series with the eminent speakers. And I convey my gratitude to our keynote speaker, Professor Elisabetta Marino, University of Rome, Tor Vergata, Italy, and Dr. Sujatha Menon, Senior Assistant Professor, Sastra, deemed to be University, Thanjavur. There is a growing awareness on the importance of gender issues nowadays, with new knowledge and new perspectives tensely debated. This webinar series will offer a room for interdisciplinary and engaged research in global environmental change, where gender plays a key role in building resilience and adaptation pathways. Now let us listen to our guest speaker, concept on women, gender, and development literature by focusing on the strength and weaknesses of various approaches in explaining the impact of development on women's status. Thank you. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for the words of wisdom. May I now invite our NAC coordinator, Dr. B. Naheshwari, ma'am, to deliver the felicitation. Ma'am, please.
Kindly unmute her audio. Ma'am, can you please tell me in which name you are? Ma'am, you can unmute now.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, good evening to you all. This international webinar series organized by the Department of English and Research Center is the right effort at the right time. NAC has made gender equity as the key component under the category institutional values and social responsibilities. This accreditation body insists that an action plan be designed by each department towards gender sensitization, and the Department of English and Research Center has contributed greatly to the institution by bringing the resource persons from around the globe to embed the essence of gender equity amongst us. Kudos to the entire team and the organizing secretary, Dr. Karthika. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the value addition. May I now invite Dr. S. Karthika, ma'am, Research Head and Assistant Professor, Shri Parasakthi College for Women, Courtallam, to introduce our resource person to our esteemed listeners.
Thank you, Sudha.
Thank you.
Before starting my introduction regarding our resource person, I would like to welcome him, ma'am. Thank you for accepting our invitation and being here with your gracious presence, ma'am. Thank you so much. So I would like to introduce our chief guest and keynote this program, today's program and the entire webinar series. Let me begin with her profile. So we have a very enlarged profile of her, and I'm just going to just brief it out in front of the audience. So she is already a renowned speaker globally. Everybody knows her. So Elisabetta Marino is Associate Professor of English Literature at University of Rome, Tor Vergata in 2000. She published a book, Tamarind in English and American Literature. And she also edited the proceedings of 2001, in the year 2001, Asia and the West Conference, organized at Tor Vergata. And she also co-edited the collection of essays entitled Diasporic, entitled Transnational, National, and Personal Voices, New Perspectives on Asian American and Asian Diasporic Women Writers in the year 2014. And in the year 2005, she published a volume entitled An Introduction to British Bangladeshi Literature. She has translated many poems by Maria Mazziotti Gillan, collected in a volume entitled Talismans. And she also edited the second volume of an e-book, New Asian American Writers, News from UK, Italy, and Asia, Literature and Visual Arts in the year 2007. In 2010, she edited the second volume of another ebook, namely Istanbul Shanghai, Essay Between East and West. And in the same year, she also co-edited entitled Positioning the New Chinese American Literature and the Changing Image of American Literary Canons. So in 2012, she edited together a book along with Tanford Emintang and Daniel Wyckham, a special forum of Journal of Transnational American Studies. And that was entitled as Redefining the American in Asian American Studies. And she also, the volume she co-edited entitled The Europe Facing Inter-Asian Cultural, Literary, Historical, and Political Situations were released in 2014. While in the same year, another collection of essays also she co-edited, and in the year, which was released in the year 2015. And in November 2016, she published a monograph, um, and she has also have done a collection of essays co-edited along with Daniela, and that was entitled as a Partition of India Beyond Improbable Lines. In 2019, she again co-edited two more collections of essays, and with that, there's a long list of her contribution to the research. So we have a very long list, and we are totally very happy to have ma'am in our webinar series as a keynote speaker. And her research areas is not only published in one part of the thing. So we could see that wide area of research she has done. So she has published extensively on travel literature, on English Romantic writers, on Italian American literature, Asian American literature, British literature, and she has been teaching both English and American literature over 20 years. So we are really very happy to have you here, ma'am. So thank you for us accepting our invitation and being here, ma'am. So I wish to take over the session, ma'am. We are eager to listen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Namaskar, everybody. And I'm really, really happy to be here. And first of all, before starting, I would like to thank the organizers of this wonderful webinar on gender studies for inviting me and for giving me the great honor of starting the webinar. So I'm really thankful to all of you. Now, the subject of my talk today is a specific part of the big genre of the novel in the Victorian era. That is the sensation novel, which is not extensively studied by scholars, and sometimes it is overlooked also in curricula. For example, in my university, very seldom teachers devote time to sensation studies. But I always choose to focus on sensation novels, especially in this period, because I believe that by focusing on the past, we can get a lot of insights on the present situation, and on the idea specifically of the construction and the fabrication of the idea of womanhood and femininity according to imposed standards. So the sensation novel, in a way, undermines everything that was set, everything that was established a woman to be. But before delving into that, I would like to remind you very briefly of what a woman was supposed to be like in the Victorian era. We know that the Victorian period is famous for being an epoch in which there was a clash between appearance and what lay behind the appearance. And we can see that from the very paradoxical nature of having a woman, with all that womanhood meant in those days, a woman as a head of a very important nation like Great Britain was. An empire, actually, because let's not forget that in 1876, Great Britain became the Empire of Britain, extended towards India, towards all the colonies. So why do I say a paradoxical nature of this? Because women were not supposed to be leaders, women were not supposed to be heads of states, women were supposed to be reserved and conservative and prim and proper, and their domain was supposed to be the house. So we have this woman who was actually the leader of a wonderful imperialistic nation, and that was in herself embodying this paradox. And how could she solve her own paradoxical nature? Well, if you have a look at all the pictures of Queen Victoria, she's always portrayed as a mother or as a wife. She's always with the family, she's always with her husband, with her children, with her dogs. I mean, the stereotypical image of the woman. And even if you look at pictures, not just the paintings that were taken of Queen Victoria, but pictures themselves, you can see that Queen Victoria never looks straight in front of her. Her eyes are always slanted, she's always looking down or she's looking elsewhere, because she has to portray herself and to cast herself as a modest, shy woman, and the mother of her people and the wife of the king. So in this way, she managed to solve the tension between being the head of a state and being a woman. Let's now have a look at the way womanhood and femininity was codified, because it was codified very strictly in those days. And literature somehow helped mold the idea of femininity. The first author that comes to my mind is an author that, at least when I mentioned him to my students, they always look at me as if to say, who is this man? Because nowadays he is not very famous. But in those days, he was extremely popular. I am talking about Coventry Patmore, who wrote a long poem in 1854, and then when he republished it 2 years later, it was an extended version of this poem. And the poem was entitled The Angel in the House. So actually the ideal of the angel in the house that everybody talks about stemmed from a literary work by Coventry Patmore, which was inspired by Coventry Patmore's wife, Emily, who was completely, angelic, she was pious, she was generous, she was self-effacing. This was one of the characteristics of the angel in the house, who was not supposed to be carnal and was not supposed to be human in her needs and prerogatives. I always quote a line from this really irritating poem, in actual fact, because it makes students understand exactly what was meant by an angel in the house. And I quote, "Men must be pleased, but to please him is woman's pleasure." That is to say, women are happy, are satisfied in their life if they make their men, husband, father, brother, happy. So in themselves, they have no right to happiness. The only happiness they get is through the happiness of another person, obviously a man and not another woman. Now, This ideal of the angel in the house was also the source of inspiration for John Ruskin's talks, famous talks. John Ruskin actually codified the idea of the doctrine of separate spheres. The fact that men were supposed to rule and be present outside, therefore, outside in the open world, whereas women were supposed to be indoors, they were supposed to be in the house, and they were not characterized by being active. Women were supposed to be passive, and their only role was to tidy up the house, be the perfect ornament of the house. But there was this split: men outside, women inside, men active, women passive. And this was codified by John Ruskin in a very important talk that he delivered in 1864, entitled Of Queen's Garden, which was a part of the book that he later on published, entitled Sesame and Lilies. So this is also very important. Literature also helped through what were known as conduct books. Conduct books were books in which women were given rules of behavior. And we have a very, very important writer of conduct books who is a woman. And now she's absolutely unknown. Nobody knows her. But in those days, she was extremely popular and extremely famous. I am talking about Sarah Stickley Hellis, who wrote in the 1840s a whole series of books entitled The Wife of England, The Daughters of England, the Women of England, and she gave all the information on the correct behavior that a woman should have if she wanted to be proper. So women were not free to express themselves. And we know it also from the point of view of literature, because we know, we are all familiar with all the writers that had to adopt a pen name in order to come forth into the press, because otherwise women were not supposed to publish, because publishing equaled to selling themselves. So a writer who was selling the product of her brain was actually equated to a prostitute that was selling her body. So writing and publishing was a shame. So in this context, where femininity was absolutely codified, femininity was codified also from the point of view of the looks of a woman. Women were supposed to be angelic. And by angelic, I mean also extremely thin. Well, in modern terms, we could have said that many Victorian women were anorexic. And we know also that Emily Bronte herself had a problem, a food disorder problem, because when she died, they had to create a coffin that was smaller than the coffins that were, the standard measure, because she was so thin. And this has nothing to do with consumption, nothing to do with tuberculosis. Women were supposed to be extremely thin, and also they were supposed to be all the same. And the stereotypical ideal of physical womanhood was achieved through the use, for example, of corsets. We all know that corsets reduced the waist to an incredibly tiny size. And this created very, very many problems health-wise, because, I mean, the ribs grew deformed and people had trouble breathing. So there were a lot of problems. But women had to appear in a certain way, they had to behave in a certain way, they had to get dressed in a certain way to be proper ladies, because otherwise they were considered commoners. Now, obviously, from the point of view of behavior, the idea of a woman who could be also an offender, therefore a criminal, a woman that was a criminal, was completely unthinkable. Women by nature were supposed to be good, generous, and selfless. Whoever committed a crime was supposed to be a deviation from the nature, from the normal standard nature of women. I am talking about this because the sensation novel talks about women who are offenders. Now, if a woman was not supposed to be an offender because it was unfeminine, women who were offenders also physically had to show the symptoms of their moral deformity. An Italian doctor, Cesare Lombroso, at the end of the 19th century, summarized and published in a book that is called The Woman Offender, summarized all these ideas, preconceived ideas on beauty and goodness and ugliness and moral deformity. He actually believed that if anybody had, I don't know, for example, even crooked eyes or not perfectly even teeth, this corresponded to a moral deformity. Literature also gives us a very clear example of that. I am sure you're all familiar with Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And you're all familiar with the character of Bertha Mason. Now, Bertha Mason, the mad woman in the attic, is mad, is deformed morally. She's an arsonist. In the end, she sets the house on fire. She kills herself. So she goes against what naturally prompts us to go on and live. And this moral deformity is perfectly evident in her body, the way Charlotte Bronte describes her physically. First of all, Bertha Mason is bigger. She's strong, she's powerful, she's man-like. Women were not supposed to be able to exercise physical strength, because physical strength was the domain of men. Women were supposed to be delicate and weak. Bertha Mason instead is strong, is powerful, is big, is taller than normal. She's larger than normal. And she's also described as if she was an animal, because she's got hairs on her legs, on her arms. So she's really described as if she was a deformity, as if she was a living freak, as if she was a monster. So the monstrosity, the physical monstrosity, mirrors our moral monstrosity. And this was a really reassuring idea. Why was it reassuring for the Victorians? Because you can detect immediately if a person is morally wholesome or not. If she is beautiful, then she's morally wholesome. If she is not, then she's a monster. Now, the sensation novel undermines this very fact, because the heroines, the negative heroines of the sensation novel, are beautiful women that really correspond to the stereotype of the Victorian ladies. They're all blonde, blue-eyed, and cherub-like. They look like little angels, but they are morally deformed. They can be bigamist, they can be arsonist, they can be child murderers, which is the most atrocious violation for a Victorian, because a woman was supposed to give life to children. She was not supposed to take the life of children. This was the biggest abomination for a woman, according to the Victorians. And this was exactly what a heroine of the sensation novel was like. But before delving, because I'm going to give you one example, I'm going to explore a little bit more of one sensation novel in particular, probably the most famous, which is entitled Lady Audley's Secret. But before delving into that, I would like to give you some more preliminary information on the genre in itself. Sensation novel. Why was it called sensation? It was called sensation novel in a very provocatory and challenging way. Women were supposed to be angels. Sensation novel appealed to the body, to the bodily feelings of a person, that very body that women were not supposed to have, because they were ethereal, angel-like figure. So actually the sensation novel had the purpose to electrify the body, give bodily pleasure. It is, if we want to compare it to maybe a modern genre, and if we want to compare it to movies, we could compare it to a horror movie. So there are some people who like horror movies because horror movies give you a thrill, okay? They give you a physical sensation of fear bordering with pleasure, which is exactly the same goal of a sensation novel. And sensation novel was extremely criticized. It was much criticized by the most conservative critics, including Margaret Oliphant, who was a prominent writer, very famous writer and commentator in those days. But I must tell you a little piece of gossip. Queen Victoria herself was extremely fond of sensation novel. She had a whole collection of sensation novels because, in a way, these books were regarded as cathartic. They could purify tensions, even anger that women had, and they could not express in their daily life because they were supposed to be prim and proper, they were supposed to be angels. Whereas by reading those books, by projecting themselves onto the characters that were violating every border, every boundary, women somehow felt empowered. It's not that they wanted to kill, it's not that they wanted to commit a crime, but through those characters, they could explore territories beyond the domestic sphere. They could express themselves beyond what was licit for women to be. So they were extremely popular. this genre started to bloom in the 1860s. It was not very long-lived, and I will explain to you why. The highest season of the sensation novel was between the 1860 and the 1870, 1872. And I am setting 1872 for a specific reason, because that corresponds to one of the Married Women Property Acts issued by Queen Victoria that somehow altered the situation of women. Because up until 1872, legal-wise, women were non-existent. So when they started to gain more rights, even literature, corresponded to that. And then we pass from the sensation novel to the new woman novel, which is a completely different story altogether. But in this very hot time, this very hot decade that brought to the 1872 Married Women Property Acts, women needed the outlet, and the outlet was provided by sensation novel. Just one thing, I was telling you that legal-wise women were not existent. This is because, according to the British common law, there was the so-called coverture. That is to say that the moment women got married, they ceased to be an individual person. As an individual, they did not exist anymore, but their very essence was incorporated, was a part of their husband's essence. The husband covered the women. That's why they talk about coverture. Cover the women in the sense that he provided for her. But in exchange, women had to give up their own identity. They did not exist anymore. So this is terrible, because you can imagine also from the point of view of problems of identification, or even if the marriage didn't work out and women were rejected by the husband, they ended up suspended because they couldn't simply go back to the life that they used to lead before getting married. So, it was a really troublesome period. And the sensation novel addressed also the tensions of marriage, focusing on marriage and the marriage market. Basically, the sensation novel did not only show the fabrication of womanhood, the very fact that there is no correspondence between beauty and goodness. You can be as beautiful as you want, and you can construct your goodness. You can appear good, but you are not. So womanhood was a fabrication, and that was exposed definitely and clearly by the sensation novel. But the sensation novel also showed that marriage was a form of legalized prostitution. Women actually sold themselves to the highest bidder, to the person that could provide the best living for them. And therefore, they had to construct themselves and manipulate also their bodies in such a way as to be marketable and pleasing for the man. And this was absolutely clearly shown in the sensation novel. Now, the novel I wanted to talk to you about is the one that basically was considered the most important, was one of Queen Victoria's favorite, actually, and also Queen Victoria's daughter's favorite. And the author was Mary Elizabeth Braddon. The name of the novel is Lady Audley's Secret. And it was published in 1862, and immediately, they ran out of copies and they had to reprint it again and again. In a very, very short period, all the copies were consumed by avid readers, and most of these readers were women, as I told you, because women wanted to have an outlet for their own anger and for their own also ambition to be different, to carve their own living, even though in this case, women were criminals. Okay. Now, the story of Lady Audley's Secret, I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil you the story, but I have to give you some information because otherwise it will be very difficult for you to follow me. But I really strongly advise you to read the novel because it's beautiful, really nicely written. The story somehow also portrays a little bit of the life of the author. Mary Elizabeth Braddon was a woman who really violated all the boundaries. First of all, before becoming a writer, she herself was an actress, and we know that actresses were seen the same way as prostitutes in the Victorian period. And why was she an actress? Because she had to help her mother, who in turn had got divorced, which is something almost unheard of in those days, because of her husband's cruelty. And therefore, in her family, women had to work because they had to provide for themselves. Then after her career as an actress, she found that a writing career was more profitable, and therefore she became a very, very prolific writer. She published a lot of novels, and she got involved in a relationship with a married man who eventually married her when his wife passed away. So she was a very, very controversial woman, and her books are extremely controversial. Now, in Lady Audley's Secret, we have the protagonist, who is this blonde, blue eyes, angel-like woman who deserted by her husband, because her husband had been stripped of all his money by his father because he had married below his station, and he had deserted her because he wanted to go abroad to Australia and make a fortune and come back. So this woman had been deserted by her husband with a newborn child, so she was a mother. And she decided to leave the child, which is something unheard of in Victorian time. She staged her own death because she pretended that she had consumption and she was dead. But in actual fact, she had found the body of a woman that looked like her. So she had abandoned her child, abandoned her old life, and she had started all over again as a governess in the house of a lord, Lord Audley, a widower, very, very old, much older than she was. And obviously he falls in love with her because she's beautiful, charming, attractive. And basically, he asks her to marry him. And going back to what I was saying about marriage, it is absolutely clear in the novel that there is no love in that couple. Basically, what Mary Elizabeth Braddon does is to expose the fact that in most marriages, it was just convenience. There was no love, there was no real mutual support, no intimacy, no friendship between the spouses. It was just a bargain. And the word bargain is used by Mary Elizabeth Braddon to describe what she believes is marriage equal to legalized prostitution. So in a paradoxical way, obviously, in a very shocking way, because marriage for the Victorians was the most sacred among the institutions, she shows that many women got married not because they loved or because they felt any form of feeling for the man, but just because these men could provide them with a high standard of living. And this is clear in the novel. In the novel, we have a woman who is a governess. So she's a working class woman who ends up becoming a lady, Lady Audley, because she gets married with Lord Audley through a bargain, not through love. So this is one of the most controversial elements of the sensation novel. It undermines, it shakes all the foundations of the Victorian era. That is the purity of woman and the sanctity of marriage. Now, the story further complicates because the husband actually comes back rich from Australia, and he doesn't buy the fact that his wife is dead. So he tries to find his wife, and then he understands that she's got married again. So she is a bigamist. She has abandoned her child, and as the story proceeds, she even tries to kill her husband. Okay, so she reveals her true colors, and she also reveals the fact that there is no equivalence between the looks of a person and the interiority of a person. So really, it was considered by the Victorians extremely shocking. But Mary Elizabeth Braddon was also a writer who lived with the proceeds of the sales of her books. So she had to convey her message. So she wanted, on the one hand, to shake the foundations of Victorian society, but on the other hand, she had to make a living. So she had to sell as many copies of her novel as possible. So in this novel, she tries to please everybody. She pleased the most revolutionary among her readers with this portrayal of marriage as a market, with this portrayal of a very, outrageous heroine, but she also pleased the conservative part of her readership, and she did it in this way. In the end, everything is explained because Lady Audley, with her unnatural behavior, because she was not woman-like, in actual fact had inherited madness from her mother. So the compromise solution is the fact that she was not really wicked because she wanted to be wicked. She was wicked because she was mad, because her mother was mad, and therefore it was not completely her fault. So readers are left with a strange feeling because on the one hand, we want to believe that she was mad. But on the other hand, it is extremely clear the fact that she is a manipulative person. And therefore, even when she says that she is mad, this could be the last act of her manipulation. So that she even gets away almost with murder, because she gets away with being a bigamist, she gets away with being an arsonist, she gets away with being a child abuser, because she abandons her child to the care of unknown people. And she finds a solution, a good solution for herself, by pretending to be mad, so that all the readers are happy. Now, the final part of the novel is also extremely interesting and somehow restores the Victorian balance. What happens in the end? When she is found out to be mad, and therefore irresponsible of her actions, like Bertha Mason. Bertha Mason also is mad. She's a mad woman in the attic, okay? So when she is found out to be mad, basically she has to leave England. She is placed in a special home for mental people in Belgium. And this is a very interesting point. It is as if the writer wanted to say, this kind of women are not wanted and not welcome in Great Britain. So we want to cut them as if they were a tumor of society and place them somewhere else. And in actual fact, the writer tells us that when Lady Audley, that is no lady anymore, because obviously she's divorced from her husband, when she speaks French, French is more natural to her mouth than English. As if to say, look, readership, she was an unnatural British woman. She was not really a British woman. Therefore, don't feel threatened by women like that, because these are unusual cases and we can get rid of them. And very interestingly, the writer describes the character, the main character, always in conjunction with the objects that clarify her status. Let me explain to you better. When she becomes Lady Audley and she gets married with Lord Audley, she's immediately associated with all the goods that she can get from her marriage. She's associated with beautiful china, with wonderful silken gowns, with wonderful perfumes, with a luxurious room. So she's always associated with things because she herself is a thing for her husband. She is the most precious property in her husband's mansion. And this is why she's always associated with commodities, because she herself is a piece of commodity. When she is rejected by her husband, immediately she loses all these objects, even though just before leaving, just before being shipped to Belgium, she tries to put in her luggage as many things as possible, as many clothes as possible, because she cannot live without her properties, because she herself identifies with properties. But interestingly enough, in the mental asylum where she goes, Mary Elizabeth Braddon describes exactly the same objects that she had in her beautiful, luxurious mansion, but as cheap replicas. So the silken dress that she used to have, the same color, she now has it in cotton, in the mental asylum. The beautiful cushion of brocade that she had, she has it in a poor fabric in the mental asylum. The most expensive perfume now becomes a cheap perfume. The softest bed now becomes a hard bed. Okay, because she is downgraded, and also her property has been downgraded because she herself was regarded as just chattel, as commodity, as something to buy when she was marketable and to release when she was not anymore marketable. Okay. Now, I think that time is up. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'm here for you for all your questions. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful deliberation. We would like the participants to pose your questions. We will have a question answer session and discussions. Thank you. So we are getting so much of compliments, ma'am, from the participant side. So excellent, informative session, thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you.
Very informative explanation with some participants. Nice presentation, beautiful session, ma'am. The
Thank you
session
so
was
much.
simply superb like that. So they said it was enlightening. Somebody commented it was an outstanding view, Sunidhi. So they all enjoyed your session they were mentioning, ma'am. It was a very wonderful session. The participants, you can just post your questions. If you want to ask any questions, we will just take few questions to ma'am. It was a crystal clear presentation.
There is a question actually. Who decided the condition of women, men in general or system? Well, in actual fact, men and the system were the same, because women had no voice in those days. They were not part of the establishment, apart from Queen Victoria, but she had to keep a low profile, even though she was the queen. Look at the pictures of Queen Victoria. They're really enlightening, because you see that she portrays herself always as a wife or as a mother or as a widow. When her husband passed away, she wore black for the rest of her life, even though her husband died in 1860. So, I mean, for 40 years, she wore black because she was the widow of Prince Albert. So the role of women was actually decided by the key people in society, who were men. Yeah.
There is a question. Can we compare olden days women to present scenario women?
Where is it?
It's from Dr.
Women's
B.
position
Tulsirani.
doesn't seem to have changed much today. Do you see any contemporary writings in the vein of sensation novels? Margaret Atwood would have written wonderful sensation novels, because in actual fact, her dystopias have got some dark innuendos, very many dark innuendos actually. So Margaret Atwood's dystopias could be compared to sensation novels. Yeah, I would say so. And you said that the situation has not changed very much, and in a way it hasn't. This is something that I always ask my students to focus their attention on. Talking about, for example, clothes. Clothes are very important because they are indicative of society. And in Italy, I don't know about India, probably in India it's different, but in Italy, for example, it has been 3 or 4 years, very high-heeled shoes are in fashion. And I always ask my female students to wonder whether they actually feel comfortable with those shoes or not. And if they are honest with themselves, they tell me, no, I don't feel comfortable at all. I can't walk. I can't walk properly. I can't run. I can't move properly. Or even very short skirts. And I always compare these feelings with a scene in Wuthering Heights when Catherine comes back from the Linton's house, and she comes back dignified and as a lady. And she has this dress, marvelous but voluminous, and she cannot run anymore the way she used to. She cannot move freely the way she used to. So yes, nowadays fashion and its dictates is exactly the same thing as the past. Or also for women to be extremely thin, and all the body shaming that is connected with having a normal way. Or if you are slightly overweight, or if you are overweight, you are ostracized, you're stigmatized. And this is exactly the way it happened in the Victorian period. You know that Victorian ladies were obsessed with being thin, and they even, as a beauty treatment and also as a thinning treatment, but it was mostly a beauty treatment for the skin, they used to bathe with arsenic. So they used to fill their tub with water and arsenic, because this was supposed to give the skin the equivalent of plastic surgery today, obviously, because the arsenic does this effect. But many women actually died because they stayed too long and the arsenic was absorbed through the skin and they died. So yeah, there are many similarities between the past and the present, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you for the question.
So the same kind of question, ma'am. Women's position doesn't seem to have changed much even today. Do you see any contemporary writing in the vein of sensation novels? So it's a question posed by Shimi Shahjahan.
Where is it?
Next to the same question, ma'am, now which you have answered.
Oh, I think I went too further down.
Yes. Women's position doesn't seem to have changed much even today.
Yes. Yes, this is what I was actually replying to this.
Yes, that's what I said.
When I spoke about Margaret Atwood. I'm going down now to see whether there are any other questions. The sensation novel attempted to subvert Victorian ideologies. Yes, obviously to subvert an ideology, it takes time, but at least the Victorian sensation novel wanted to suggest that there were alternative ways to be, or that women were not naturally so perfect. There was a construction of womanhood according to the standards. Yes, so they wanted to shake the pillars of Victorianism, that's for sure. Can we agree with the notion that marriage is a legalized prostitution at present? Well, it depends. No. Well, I think that nowadays women have a choice. In the past, women did not have a choice, or the choices were really limited. Obviously, there are cases. I'm talking about Italy, for example. There are cases in which women choose to get married because they need a provider, okay? But this is extremely rare. Now, fortunately, women are into education. They have equal opportunities also from the point of view of jobs, even though there are still some difficulties. And if there is one position advertised, it's more likely that the man gets the position, even though men and women may be equally qualified. Why? Because then women have children, then women take time off work because of the children. But this is slowly changing, and I think we are heading towards equal rights, complete equal rights. At least this is my hope, finger crossed. Now, how can we justify that this novel was Queen Victoria's favorite? Queen Victoria herself had a very contradictory relationship, for example, with motherhood. If you read Queen Victoria's private papers, for example, she was not at all fond of her children. She didn't like being pregnant because she had problems with her body. She didn't like herself with this growing belly. And obviously, because of social pressures, she had a lot of pregnancy. But it was not really her ambition. She was ahead of the state and she knew that. So probably she needed to release herself the tensions that she had accumulated by having to portray herself in a way that she really wasn't. So that's probably why she likes sensation novels so much. Do women in the sensation novels are examined from a psychological aspect? Okay, well, not directly. There are not many psychological insights, but the way the novel is constructed, it is in such a way as to stir the sympathy of the reader. So somehow we readers justify the bigamist, the arsonist, the child murderer, not justify, but at least we understand why this woman acted in this way. So it's not explicit, it works more on the reader than on the character itself. So it's not really a psychological novel. The novel's title is Lady Audley's Secret. I will write it now. Lady Audley Secret. It's a beautiful novel, really entertaining. Okay.
There are a few questions too, ma'am. Whether the role of women has in generally improved during the Victorian age. What about Hardy's portrayal of women?
Hardy, yes.
Hardy's portrayal of
yeah, yes, absolutely. It has improved also because women started battling for their rights and slowly gaining a voice. Thomas Hardy actually was associated, even though he was not a woman, obviously, with the New Woman novel, because he presented in his novels female characters that obviously were not stereotypical, but were justifiable. Take, for example, Tess of the D'Urberville. She's also a murderer. But the subtitle of Tess of the D'Urbervilles is a pure woman faithfully presented. That is to say, purity has nothing to do with looking pure. I mean, the circumstances have to be taken into consideration. She was tricked into losing her virtue, let's put it in this way. She was a victim, but society would have condemned her had they known that she had had sex before marriage. So Thomas Hardy actually, yes, was one of those who promoted a change in the perception of womanhood. But obviously, Thomas Hardy was harshly criticized by his contemporaries. Take, for example, also Jude the Obscure. In Jude the Obscure, he features also the character of the child who is a child murderer. But why? But because, as the child himself said, we are too many. Because there is not enough food to feed all the children, and that's why he had killed his brother. So yes, Thomas Hardy certainly contributed to molding a new ideal of womanhood. Yes, yes.
I would like to take a question from YouTube viewer also, ma'am. Shall I?
Yes, please.
A question from Rajini. She's a YouTube viewer. She's asking, women with identity is considered to be a warning to the societal morality norms. Please comment, ma'am. Women with identity.
Yes.
Women with identity is considered to be a warning to the societal morality norms. Women with identity is considered to be the
yes,
considered to be a warning to the society morality norms, societal morality norms. She's asking that question.
Okay. Yes, women who had the courage to express themselves, they were considered as a threat. If you think that Virginia Woolf in Professions for Women wrote that the first thing that every woman had to do in order to acquire an individual voice was to kill the angel in the house in herself. So, and in a way, we have ourselves this burden. I talk about personal experience also, and also experience of other women that are, women with culture, women with a profession, but still we have a saying in Italy that we have to kill the nurse that is in us, because otherwise we will justify everything that a husband or a man does, because, oh, we will change him, oh, we will teach him. No, I mean, women must have the courage and the right to be themselves no matter what. And there were women with an identity like that were certainly considered as undermining society. That's why, as I told you at the beginning of the lecture, that's why many women had to adopt a pen name, a male pen name, a masculine pen name. The very Mary Shelley, before the Victorian age, had to publish Frankenstein anonymously, because otherwise he would have not sold. And it sold very well because everybody thought that Percy Shelley was the author. When it was clear that she had authored Frankenstein, the sales of the book collapsed, because women were not supposed to express such revolutionary ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a few more questions also coming. Whether the commodification of women stems from Victorian age? Minu is asking whether the commodification of women stems from Victorian age.
Okay, actually, the commodification of women was evident in the Victorian age. Was really, really clear, because obviously marriages were arranged in such a way as to either join properties, or, I mean, there was calculation in every important marriage. But the idea of women considered as objects was expressed very clearly also by Mary Wollstonecraft in Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which was published, if I am not mistaken, for sure in the last decade of the 18th century. I think it was 1793, I'm not sure. But in Vindication of the Rights of Woman, Mary Wollstonecraft clarified the fact that women were like birds. She uses this metaphor, like birds with beautiful feathers, and these women had to beautify their feathers so that they could be purchased by men and locked in cages. So the idea of the domestic domain for the women, and the fact that women had to be beautiful to secure for themselves The most profitable marriage was already clear in Mary Wollstonecraft's times. Yeah.
Another question from YouTube viewer, ma'am. How
Yes.
to make such an environment where we start applying them instead of just believing and talking?
You're
How to make such an environment?
Yes.
How to make such an environment, which you are referring to, how to make such an environment where we start applying them instead of just believing and talking. We are believing and talking about this. So the question is how to make such an environment.
Okay, how can we create a healthier environment, basically? We can create it exactly the way we are doing now with these webinars, spreading ideas, exchanging ideas, connecting with other empowered women, and promoting also literature written by women. Not because I want to promote women, but just because there are so many treasures that for centuries were hidden because women were not considered. So we need to excavate women from archives. We need to republish also works by women writers. At the moment, I'm writing a book on Victorian travel writers to the Ottoman Empire, which is proving to be an extremely interesting and challenging task, because these are people that nobody heard about, but what they write is extremely meaningful and is insightful and provides also a different insights on the society they lived in. So we can redress wrongs and create a new balance by reading, talking, teaching. The teaching part is important. I see many of you are teachers and professors at university. Teaching women writers is important because it makes students aware of the fact that there is a whole side of literature that for centuries has passed unnoticed, but yet it deserves proper attention. Yes. Thank you.
We will take one more question, ma'am. Only one more question. What do you think about the insanity of Bertha Mason in Jane Eyre? Was she actually insane? Or it was because of her husband's affair?
Well, this is one
it was a way to vent out her anger.
This is one of the theory, actually, and White Sargasso Sea, actually, by Jean Rhys, explores the story from the point of view of Bertha Mason, obviously. I honestly believe that there are many implications in the character of Bertha Mason. She is not, Charlotte Bronte is not just delving into the problem of womanhood and deviation from the canon of womanhood. She's also exploring another problem, that is the problem of mixing races, which was regarded with particular anxiety by the Victorians. Probably it is possible to infer that Bertha Mason was mad because she was mixed blood. And this is also controversial because it explores the fear that the Victorians had of mixing with foreign blood. And this fear, in a way, also consolidated their imperialistic position because they had to be white and they had to dominate over the rest. When a white man like Rochester marries a woman who is mixed race, the implication is trouble arises because the blood has to be kept pure. Not that Charlotte Bronte actually shared this view, but she explores this view as one of the most widespread. In actual fact, if we read carefully, in a way, Bertha Mason wanted to warn Jane on the fact that she was being tricked into a marriage with a bigamist, because this was exactly what would have happened if Bertha Mason had not visited Jane overnight and she had not destroyed her beautiful veil. The destruction of the veil is symbolic. She wants to unveil the conscience of Jane. So, I mean, there are a lot of layers of significance in Jane Eyre and in the character of Bertha. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
So we could also receive so many comments from YouTube too. Mesmerizing ideas. Your answers are so optimistic, ma'am. And people are asking whether
I am optimistic because I honestly believe that we are doing a lot. And I mean, this webinar is wonderful and it's showing that. I mean, 290 participants, it's incredible. Congratulations to all of you.
Even in YouTube, more than 900 registrations are there. Ma'am.
Wow, incredible. Thank you.
So many comments we are receiving. So do you think really complete freedom is given to women on literature basis? A question from YouTube viewer. Really complete freedom is given from literature. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will leave you my email address. So if you want to keep in touch, I will be more than delighted. I'll write it. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you.
We will have a formal vote of thanks, ma'am. Sudha, can you take over?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Okay. May I now invite Mrs. S.P. Sundari, ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Shri Parasakthi College for Women, Courtallam, to propose vote of thanks for our first session resource person.
Have you get connected?
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes. Proceed, please. Proceed, please.
Yes. Okay. Good evening to one and all present here. I deemed it as an honor to propose vote of thanks. At the outset, I would like to thank the Almighty for His benevolence. Next, I thank the Secretary, Mr. T. Paranjori, Management, and Madam Principal, Dr. Janet Sundari, for their constant support. I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. HOD and convener, Mrs. A.S. Radha, organizing secretary, Dr. Katiha, head Research Center in English, and Dr. Rajeshwari, HOD SF for arranging this one-week international webinar series. Next, I thank the keynote speaker, Professor Elisabetta Marino, University of Rome, for accepting our invitation and raising this occasion. To throw light on the sensational novels from the Victorian era, giving us a clear distinction between the roles of women, how the roles played by women, how she's satisfied, gets satisfaction by satisfying others, and from quoting text from John Ruskin, Emily Bronte, etc. That was an insightful presentation, ma'am. And next, I thank the participants across the globe, without whom the program would not be a grand success. Thank you, one and all present here.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. It was a really wonderful pleasure to have you here, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
that we can continue with the next session. I think our resource person is in. You can just proceed.
Okay. Okay. So we'll start our second session today. May I now invite Dr. S. Karthika ma'am, Research Head and Assistant Professor, Shri Parasakthi College for Women, Courtallam, to introduce our second session resource person to our esteemed listeners.
Welcome, ma'am. So it's my pleasure to introduce our this session's resource person, Dr. Sujatha Menon. So she's also a very renowned speaker. Many of you have noticed her in many webinars and all. So Dr. Sujatha Menon is a senior assistant professor, Sastra deemed to be University, Thanjavur. Prior to this, she was a language teacher and a trainer at Zazan University, Saudi Arabia. She has been teaching for almost 25 years at the tertiary level, and she has many publications to her credit and has conducted so many workshops, nearly 45 workshops, webinars, and training programs. She is a storyteller. She is deeply interested in storytelling, oral storytelling, myth, mythopia, technology enhanced, language learning, and material design. She won the Excellence Award for Publication in Zazan University in the year 2019. And above all, she is a die-hard and a passionate teacher. So we welcome you, ma'am, to the session, and it's our pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Take over the session, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Can I share the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, can you please allow me to share the screen?
Yes, I'm allowing. Now we can share.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's perfect.
Vanakkam, namaste, and assalamu alaikum to all of you present here. And in fact, I was here well before time, and I was really amazed by Professor Marino's, talk on women and women empowerment. So I think I'll take off from where the opening batsman left. I will be talking about woman as the vigilante killer. Well, that's something that most of us don't talk about. So I thought I will choose this topic today to discuss the role of woman as a killer, which is very rare. To start with, let me talk about Toralmoa's concept of the female, the feminine, and the feminist. Now, according to Toralmoa, the word female is biological, where you clearly distinguish between the anatomy of the male and the anatomy of the female. Now, the term feminine is sociological. As Simone de Beauvoir said, one is not born a woman, one becomes one. So don't our parents and grandparents tell us walk slowly, talk softly, don't raise your voice. This is uncharacteristic of women. So feminine is sociological and feminist is political, where you fight for equal rights. Now, in almost all my webinars, I make this point very clear. You could call it a disclaimer, you could call it whatever. According to me, a feminist does not have to be a woman. Please note, feminism is not related to gender. Any human being who respects a woman and who believes that women are worthy of respect and dignity in society is a feminist, irrespective of gender. And anybody who considers woman a tool of, a tool to be oppressed, to be treated like a doormat, is an anti-feminist, a misogynist, irrespective of gender. This is my constant statement in most webinars, because often there is a misnomer, a misconception among people that, you know, a feminist is a woman always fighting against men. That's not the way it goes. So with these, let me start off. Now, this is what Francis Bacon said. He said, revenge is wild justice. And he also said that the person who seeks revenge always keeps his or her wounds green. Meaning you keep your hatred fresh. You keep your anger fresh in order to take revenge. Now, what do you mean by the idea of vigilante and why is it related to revenge? Now, when you say vigilante, you're referring to a community or you're referring to a man or a woman who takes law into his or her hands because the legal system is not good enough. The legal system has not performed its functions properly, and therefore the individual takes law into his or her hands. The individual punishes people for the wrongs that they have committed. So this is the concept of vigilante. Now, there are so many films that are based on this genre. Now, why did I choose the film narrative? Because these days, films are into a lot of experimentation. As much as literary texts are, films are into a lot of experimentation, and there's a great deal of interpretation. It's like layers of an onion, you know, they keep unfolding. So this is precisely why I chose film narratives. Now, if you look at the vigilante genre, I'd like to talk about two types of vigilante genres. One, where the woman seeks justice and takes revenge in a more, you know, in a gentler way. And I want to talk about the other concept of justice, which takes on a very fierce form, the form of gory revenge. Okay. Now, let me start off with the Hollywood Code. Although my focus is more on Indian cinema, let me start off with the Hollywood Code. Now, this was established on 31st March, not 31st, 30th March 1930. And it stayed on to the late 1960s. Now, what is this so-called Hollywood Code? It says that, you know, there should be no portrayal of revenge in films. And it was followed very strictly until the late 60s and even until the early 70s. Okay, so they said revenge shall not be justified. And I want you to note the second line, the second sentence. In lands and ages of less developed civilization and moral principles, revenge may sometimes be presented. Please look at this Eurocentric attitude. Less developed civilization. So what are they talking about? So you clearly have a distinction between the West and the rest. You know, where the West considers itself absolutely refined, absolutely civilized. So look at this. It's only in heathen cultures, less developed cultures, that you have the concept of revenge. So this is the case where no law exists to cover the crime. So look at this attitude, the Eurocentric attitude, the concept, as I told you, of the West and the rest. And Hollywood strictly followed this until the early 70s. Now, as far as India is concerned, you should say hats off to Indian cinema because they decided to carve an identity for themselves. Indian cinema has carved a niche, an identity of its own. You know why? Because they did not follow the center, the Hollywood Code. So what did they do? In 1939, there was a Tamil film released called Veera Ramani. In Veera Ramani, Ramani is a lady who's in love with a man called Murthy. But Murthy is in love with another woman, Meenakshi, who is not good enough for him. And what happens is that Murthy is fabricated and put in prison for a crime he has not committed at all. And after being released from prison, he is not able to sustain himself. He has no job and he takes to minor burglaries. So on learning of his condition and on learning of the fact that people have really taken him for a ride and people have treated him badly, Ramani disguises as a man. And she goes as a male vigilante and seeks justice. Okay, but mind you, nobody is killed here. Nobody is killed here in this film. It's just that she wants to teach people a lesson. Everything is done in a legal way. And look at the kind of symbolism. Woman cannot do anything on her own. As woman, she is helpless in society. So what is she doing? She has no distinct identity, and so she has to disguise herself as a man, because only a man can achieve something in society. So if you look at Randor Guy's interpretation of this particular film, he says it's a beautiful film, and the heroine has played an excellent role even in stunts and all that. She has performed as well as the male character has done. Srinivasa Rao has performed. So what happens here? You have the emergence of the woman, but under the guise of a man. Just as Mary Ann Evans wrote under the male name George Eliot, you have Veera Ramani trying to rear her head, but under the guise of a man. So this is the first of its kind, where woman takes the role of a vigilante, but she's not a killer here. She's only trying to put an end to corruption and injustice in society, but no human beings who represent this injustice are killed. So this is the first stage. Now, this is the goddess Themis. She's considered, the goddess of justice in Greek mythology. The Roman counterpart is Dikes, D-I-K-E-S. That is why you have the term Theodicy coming from Dikes. Dikes meaning justice and Theo meaning God. So Theodicy, divine justice or providence. Now please take a look at the statue. Do you remember the first slide that I showed you? In that the sword is upheld. The sword is uplifted. But here the sword is down. So please note, Themis is blindfolded, meaning justice seeks no distinction between the rich and the poor, between man and woman, between the upper class and the lower class, the upper caste and the lower caste. Okay? Anyone who commits a crime is prone to the judicial system and is to be remanded under judicial custody. And the scales, meaning everybody is equal. The sword is to cut or to distinguish fact from fiction. To distinguish truth from lies. This is what was the intended symbolism or allegory that came with the statue of Themis. Okay. Now, let me look at the Themis archetype. Now, please note, there is a goddess in every woman and a god in every man. And there is an inherent pattern, what we call the archetype in every human being. So what we do is, we try to invoke that archetype on certain circumstances. So there were films that invoked this Themis archetype. For example, as I told you, in Veera Ramani, it is the Themis archetype that is invoked. In 1943, Mangamma Sapatham, again Tamil cinema, brought out Mangamma Sapatham, which starred Ranjan and Vasundhara Devi. And here again, it is a reliving of the Themis archetype. Here again, nobody is killed. The king is a womanizer. He tries to misbehave with a woman and she rejects his advances. So the king, in order to take revenge, marries her and says, I will not consummate the wedding. I will not sleep with you. Let your virginity remain as it is till the day you die. And in turn, Mangamma vows that she will bear a son and that son will teach him a lesson. He will question him in open court. So Mangamma digs a tunnel with the help of her father and her brother from her prison. And there she escapes. She goes under the guise of a tribal woman, entices the king, sleeps with him, becomes pregnant with his child, bears a son who's also again a lookalike of his father. And finally, the son whips his father in court and questions him for what he has done. So there, Mangama stops her son and says, no, this is your father, respect your father. And everything, ends well. All is well that ends well. It's a comedy of errors, finally. So what happens here? It is not public revenge, as in the case of Veera Ramani, it is personal revenge. It is a personal vendetta. But along with it, there are other things that get fulfilled. For example, the king, who is a womanizer, understands that it is wrong to, approach a woman without her consent. In the Brahmanda Purana, actually, you have a lot of parallels to mythology as well. In the Brahmanda Purana, Devdutt Patnaik talks about how after killing Tarakasura, Lord Subramanya or Kartikeya was seized with an uncontrollable sexual urge. And whichever woman crossed his path, he had sex with her. And finally, the gods went to, the goddess Parvati, the Lokamata, and told her, look, this unwarranted, sexual desire is not good. He should learn to respect women. And the goddess Parvati cast a spell on him that whenever he went near a woman, he could only see his mother in her. And that is when he decided that he will not approach a woman without her consent. So we do have this whole idea of woman being taken with her consent and without her consent presented in mythologies. So here the king undergoes a change. Again, through her son only, Mangamma is able to take revenge, sweet revenge, of course, against her husband, the king. So here again, in 1943, in the films, woman is not considered independent enough to seek justice. Okay, it was remade into a film in Telugu of the same name, where N.T. Ramarao was the chief actor. Now, after the 70s, okay, you have, for example, as far as Indian cinema is concerned, it is after the 70s, it's the early 80s that you have the sword uplifted. You have some images of Themis with the sword uplifted. But in most cases, the statue of Themis is always shown with the sword down. So when the sword is uplifted, what does this symbolize? That you use the sword not just to distinguish between truth and perjury, between fact and fiction, but to slash across those who are wrongdoers, who are perpetrators of crime. So here you have a completely different genre emerging, where woman decides to take law into her hands and where woman's chastity is questioned. When her purity is questioned, when her womanhood is questioned, woman takes law into her hands. This is the uplifting of the sword. Now, Sarah Prajowski says that in most films and television shows, when rape is presented, there is always a contradiction. Number one, what do the feminists want? They want to represent rape in order to show how gory it is, how terrible it is, and how much a woman suffers physically, mentally, and psychologically, how she undergoes severe trauma, post-stress trauma, and how it's so difficult for her to come out of it. But what happens is the very representation of rape is sometimes so vivid that, it incites interest in the audience, and this itself becomes a backlash against womanhood. So there is always a paradox whenever rape narratives are represented on screen. And what Schubert says is, this is from the Rape Revenge film, a critical study by Nicholas Heller. This is one of the best books that I have read. And if you get a chance to read the book, please do read. And Schubert says that when a woman is raped, it is a kind of initiation which leads to a transformation. And after the rape, there is a definite transformation from a woman who's gentle, sometimes submissive or docile, to a woman who's an avenger. The woman who's fierce, who seeks justice. Now, I Spit on Your Grave is the first of its kind as far as Hollywood is concerned. This film was, released in 1978. It's about a woman who is raped by 4 or 5 men. She's a writer, and how she seeks revenge, how she slashes out at every one of them who takes revenge. I mean, who rapes her. She takes revenge on every one of them. Now, this was the response of one of the critics to the film. He says, a vile bag of garbage, because they can't accept the fact that a woman has, reared her head to seek justice. So this is the first of its kind where a woman rears her head as the vigilante killer. Okay. Now, what do you see here? I'm looking at it also from an archetypal perspective. From Themis, the movement is towards Artemis, the huntress. So who is Artemis? Actually, there is a contradiction here as well. Artemis is considered the virgin goddess, number 1. 2, she is considered the guardian of animals, the protectress of forests, and she's also the huntress. So you have in Artemis, woman who sustains, woman who protects, and also woman who hunts and who destroys. So there is a dichotomy presented within the same image. Okay. Now, in most images of Artemis, you have her represented with a stag, with a deer. But there are also images of Artemis with a wild dog, with a hound. Okay. So with the hound, she hunts down those who commit mistakes, who commit vile deeds. Now, actually, Sarah Maitland, in one of her short stories called The Lady Artemis, talks about or discusses or recreates the myth of Actaeon and Artemis. Actaeon was a hunter who hunted with his hounds relentlessly. Now, in spite of being warned, he ventured into a place which was sacred to Artemis or Diana. And there he sees the goddess bathing nude. And when he views her nudity, she stands up and lets him view her nudity in full swing, and she gives him a very strange smile. And what she does is she sets his own hounds against him, and his hounds tear him to pieces. So, this is the concept of Actaeon and Artemis. So the hounds representing the, the guardians of justice and the avenging angels. And in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, you have Shakespeare saying an earthly path that then become like gods when, mercy seasons justice. But here it is justice that seasons mercy. There is no mercy shown to the person who commits a vile deed. It is justice and it is killing. So the balance is struck. You did something wrong, in turn, you're finished, you're killed. This is that gory, that extreme step that is taken in films, where you have woman emerging as the vigilante killer. So from woman being the victim, woman becomes the reciprocator, the perpetrator of gory and violent justice. Now, this is from her autobiography, The Bandit Queen, which was also made into a film in 1994. Now, I'm not going to discuss that particular film here because there's a lot of controversy regarding that film. There are many film critics and art critics who still say that this film, The Bandit Queen, was more a personal vendetta. It's more a personal vendetta. Even this film, I Spit on Your Grave, is a personal vendetta. Okay, it's not that she goes to avenge the others who are wrongdoers in public. It's a personal vendetta. So there are many critics who say that Poolan Devi's case is a case of personal vendetta. Most of her killings are based on personal revenge. Now, what fascinated me was the concluding lines of The Bandit Queen. The demon struck me with lightning, and I became the lightning for others. Now, the word lightning has two meanings here. The first part, the demon struck me with lightning. Here, the lightning is seen as a phallic symbol. So the reference to the rape, the man overpowers woman using rape as a method of torture, punishment, as a method of control. And I became the lightning for others. Here in the second part of it, I became the lightning for others. Here, lightning refers to a symbol of justice, a symbol of revenge, a weapon of justice or a weapon of revenge. It is no longer seen as a phallic symbol. In the hands of man, it is a phallic symbol, but in the hands of woman, it is not a phallic symbol. It is the symbol of justice. It is the symbol of vigilante killing. So she says, I became the lightning for others, but still critics are not ready to accept that. They say, no, it was more of personal vendetta that was involved in this. Now, we come to Tamil cinema. In 1984, this film, Niraparadi meaning innocent, free from crime. This film was released in 1984, 6 years after I Spit on Your Grave was released. Now here you have the first of its kind where woman rears her head to fight not just for herself, but for others. Woman as a vigilante killer, fighting for others, not just for herself. And again, as Shubha said, the rape becomes the initiation, which brings about a transformation in her, from Themis to Artemis, from the docile woman to Kali. So Madhavi plays the important role here. She is drugged and led into the flesh trade for a day by a pimp. And on getting a chance, she takes the knife in the bathroom and she slits his throat. And after that, she realizes that there are many women like her who are forced into the flesh trade or who are raped by men, who are brutally abused by men. And she takes it upon herself to wreak vengeance upon those people. So here you have the real emergence of woman as the vigilante killer in Tamil cinema. In 1984, you have Niraparadi, where Madhavi takes on the pivotal role. So here again, you have woman fighting for justice. And here again, you don't have any hounds with her. It is her own willpower which, helps her on. And there, the psychiatrist, here again, there's one thing you need to understand. With the rape narrative of the 1980s, I will be dealing with yet another one. You have the concept, you still have a contradiction. On the one hand, you have woman fighting. Okay, she wreaks vengeance. And on the other hand, you also have woman also crying and degrading herself, saying, I have become impure. So the concept of rape associated with impurity, dirt, being unclean. So that is also there. So the Sujatha, who plays the role of the psychiatrist in the film, she says, no, what happened with you was an accident. You have been wronged. You have committed no wrong. So do not consider yourself as being defiled or polluted. What happened in your life was an unfortunate accident. So do not look at it that way. But towards the end, when her fiance tells her, he's an inspector of police, he tells her, why don't you surrender to the police? I will try my best to safeguard you. She says, I will not be seen as a convict. She says, I am innocent. I have committed no crime. And with that, she kills herself. With the very same weapon with which she killed others, she kills herself. So this is what happens in the first of its kind. Here again, woman emerging as a vigilante killer, but surrounded by the concepts, the traditional concepts of morality, and seeing chastity as sacrosanct and rape as defilement of chastity. 1988, Dimple Kapadia's film, Zakhmi Aurat, The Wounded Woman. Now here she plays the role of Kiran Dutt, Inspector Kiran Dutt. And when she raises her finger against the wrongdoers, they take revenge by raping her. It's a gang rape, which is inflicted on her. So they take revenge by raping her. I have a request. Can you just disable, scribbling? Because I think that isn't disabled. Can you please disable that? Thank you. So what happens is she is raped. She is gang raped. And what happens after that? She is insulted in court. She is gang raped and she's insulted in court. And the Chief Justice, he questions her, the prosecutor questions her in such a way that she's put to shame. And finally, her friend, who is a doctor, suggests a remedy. They all form a team of women who decide to take revenge against rapists. Not just the men who raped her, against rapists in general. So what happens is the doctor says that these men must be drugged. She will perform an operation on them and she will castrate them. Okay? And they will not be killed or anything. They will be castrated. It will be done in a proper way by an operation, and they will be left safely from where they were picked up and drugged. Okay, so this is what happens. Now, what do you see here? You don't have killing, sexual killing. The man's sex is killed completely. He becomes incapable of performing with another woman in future. So, is castration the solution? This is the question that the film asks. It was subject to a great deal of controversy. Even now, we don't have many films dealing with castration. So in 1988, you can imagine Zakhmi Aurat, or the wounded woman, dealing with castration as one of the solutions. Now here again, you have self-degradation. Dimple Kapadia tells her fiancé. She says, एक बूंद शराब भी गंगा जल में मिल जाएगा तो पूरी गंगा गंदी हो जाएगी, मैली हो जाएगी, अशुद्ध हो जाएगी. Meaning, even if a drop of alcohol were to be mixed with the sacred Ganges, the Ganges gets polluted. So this is again the concept. This is, an inherent contradiction which you find in the rape narrative. So even when woman is a vigilante killer, here again, the word killer is not where she kills people, where she castrates them. So here, although you have justice meted out quite violently, what happens here? Self-degradation. So what are you questioning here? Are you questioning the action? Are you questioning morality? Becomes a big question mark. Now, I'm moving straight on to Velle Pookal, The White Flowers, which was released in 2019. Now, Velle Pookal, which was released in 2019, is also a film dealing with the female as the vigilante killer. Now, this refers to the dandelion. Now, the dandelion is not white in color. It is basically yellow. You also have the dandelion in others, but once it stops flowering, then it becomes like this. And it is through this particular tufts that pollination takes place. They fly off in different directions, and from there they take root and they form. So here, Velle Pookal, here it refers to children. And here you have the main character, Alice, fighting against child abuse because she was herself a victim of child abuse. So Nicole, she was abused by her father. We don't know if she was just violently abused or whether she was sexually abused. That is not mentioned straight in the film. Her father is a drug addict. He trades with other girls. He, drugs them, intoxicates them, rapes them, and he sells them. He introduces them into the flesh trade. Her father is a garbage van, driver, a truck driver, a garbage truck driver, again being symbolic of the garbage that he himself is. So here Nicole takes the gun against her father. That is the first killing she does. And it doesn't stop there. It goes on. She goes on a spree. And it is not just for herself. She begins to take the gun. She takes the knife against every human being, man or woman, every human being who dares abuse children. And here you have the Diana or the Artemis archetype. Just as Diana, the goddess Diana, has her hound with her, Alice always has her dog with her. So you have her hounding people. But as in most cases, such people are always brought to justice. Because finally, you can't have films where, rape or such vigilante killing is left as it is. Whenever there is vigilantism or vigilante killing, there is always towards the end the hand of justice that is uplifted, because finally you can't have a film which justifies such killings. We like such films. Why do such films gain popularity in public? Why? Because such films are very important. They indulge, or they help the reader or the audience indulge in a willing suspension of disbelief. What is not possible in real life is possible in the film, on the screen. And that is precisely why we take up such archetypes, why we enjoy such films. Beyond a point, you may say, come on, what film was it? I think they shouldn't have shown it this way. But why we enjoy such films? Why? Because we are in a willing suspension of disbelief. What is not possible in real life is possible on the screen. This is precisely why we like it. Now I come to the film that really rocked theaters, which has really been very popular, Bulbul. Now, Bulbul, the bird, the nightingale that sings on trees. Now, I'd like you to take a look at this. You see the goddess Kali. She's scantily dressed, okay? She's scantily dressed. She has, she sucks or she drinks the blood of demons, okay? She has a knife in her hand, the weapon of justice. And look at her jumping between flowers or plants. This is exactly what Bulbul also does. If you see, this is what Bulbul also does, isn't it? Jumping from trees, again with disheveled hair like Kali. Do you see the similarity brought between Kali, the archetypal image of the goddess Kali, and the character Bulbul? Now, let me go on to the story. And before I move on to the story, let me tell you one thing. The background is the presidency of Bengal, which was in 1881, which was set in 1881. Now, here, before we proceed to the character of Bulbul and the other characters, you must understand that the Vedas talk about the goddess Aranyani, the forest goddess. Aranyakhandam, where Ram goes to forest. Aranyani, the goddess of the forest. In West Bengal, in the Sundarbans, you have the Bonabibi, you have the Bonadevi or the Vanadevi, the Bonadurga or the Vanadurga, the goddess who protects the jungle. Now, if you look at the forest as woman, then Bulbul is the protectress of the forest in every sense, because she protects woman from being abused by man. This is what Bulbul does. So who is this Bulbul? She is just 5 or 6 years old, a child bride who is married to a man in his late 20s or even early 30s, Indranil. And let me tell you one more thing. Indranil has a twin brother, Mahendra, who's, slightly psychotic. He's mentally ill, and his wife is Binodini. And Binodini has an affair. She sleeps with Indranil, Bulbul's husband, because her husband is, mentally disturbed and deranged. So she has an affair. She is almost the mistress of Indranil. Of course, this is a secret which stays within the mansion. She's married to the Zamindar Indranil. But she thinks that her brother-in-law, Indranil's youngest brother, Satya, is her husband. Because, in Bengali weddings, you have two betel leaves placed like this. The bride holds two betel leaves like this. And the first gaze that she has is of her husband. But actually, Bulbul is a child. She loves jumping on trees, playing, and things like that. So, through the gap in the betel leaves, she sees Satya, and she thinks Satya is her husband because he is more or less of her age. But later on, Indranil, laughingly tells her, later on, when you grow up, you will know the difference between husband and brother-in-law. But, Bulbul's mind is not able to accept Indranil as her husband. She always nurses a kind of attraction for Satya. We can ask, why did she get attracted towards Satya? Why didn't she accept her husband? See, we are not talking about everybody in society. We are talking about somebody in society who is slightly different. So here you have Bulbul, who's slightly different. Now, Binodini never wastes a single chance. Mind you, it's woman versus woman here. Binodini sees her as a rival right from Bulbul's childhood. Binodini is already grown up. She's already, got everything. She has enough of jewelry. She's already always draped in silk. All that is fine. But she never wastes a single opportunity in degrading Bulbul. Now, when the two of them tell stories to each other, always Satya tells us stories of the Chudel, the witch, who lives in trees, who has, reverse feet, and who always drinks the blood of, human beings, and she waits for the princess to come to drink her blood. And when Vinodini interrupts, she says, why does he want me? The Thakur wants you. Why does he want me? And for that, a sarcastic comment. I know. Why does he want you? I'm the one who takes care of all his needs. Why should he want you? Why doesn't he understand that you want only Satya? Mind you, children, they are just children. She's just 6 or 7 and he's around 11 or 12. They're playing with each other, telling each other stories. She doesn't waste a single second, and she always sings a song. Hey Kalankini, there is a song which she always mutters to herself. And she says, mind you, she doesn't look at herself. She's sleeping with her husband's brother. She says, oh, you defamed woman, why are you looking at that bastard who's standing outside? Why are you looking at that rascal who's standing outside? Why are you running towards him all the time? And finally, when Indranil is goaded to a point where he thinks that, his wife loves only Satya and doesn't love him at all, what does he do? He mutilates her feet. He mutilates her feet, and her feet become almost reversed. And when her feet are suspended, and when, she's undergoing treatment, Mahendra, who has some kind of an attraction for her, he is, mind you, deranged. He rapes her. And it is after the rape that there is a change in Bulbul. Shubhar is right. It is this rape that leads to an initiation. Even the mutilation doesn't lead to an initiation. When she's raped, she is fed up. And that is when the transformation in her takes place. She becomes the Devi, but in the eyes of the world, she is a Chudel. And mind you, she not only kills Mahendra, she, bites him at the neck and kills him. makes Binodini a widow. And mind you, in those days, widows had to tonsure their head. They had to wear only white. They can't wear any jewelry. They can't eat non-vegetarian. They are not prone to any luxury. They have to wear only white and they have to wash their own clothes and live in an outhouse for widows. So she inflicts punishment not just on Mahendra, but also on Binodini. And Indrani leaves the house. And from then onward, Bulbul takes over. She rules the Haveli. She is always the Devi. Nobody knows about it. She is the Devi. Mind you, she's so good at climbing trees, jumping from trees. She is the Devi who protects children and women from being abused by men. She targets only those who abuse women. She respects those who respect women and children. And when her brother-in-law Satya comes back, he wonders why she's changed so much. And all said and done, he's also, a part of the systemic patriarchy. He says, when the doctor Sudeep comes, why is it you don't even wear your gungat? How can you be like this? And, at a point he says, he doesn't even ask her, what is your point of view? Why are you doing this? And things like that. He says, I think you have forgotten all sense of shame. I have already written to Indranil Bhai Sahab. And, I think it's better we send you to your hometown, to your parents' place. He doesn't even ask her what her point is. The same mistake which her husband did. He kept listening to Binodini. He says, "Aap sab ek jaise hain. We're all the same. No change in all of you." So this is how you see Bulbul, when she goes to the forest and whoever comes for witch hunting to the forest, she kills them. And she only targets those men who are outrightly abusers of children or abusers of their wives. And once when an old man tries to misbehave with a child, he invites the child to his bathtub, makes her sit naked and asks her to come closer. At that time she comes and she kind of, bites his jugular vein. To the others, she is a witch. But to the child, she's Kali Ma. Why? Because she's the protectress. So please note, here she becomes the protectress. And mind you, if you look at the difference in Vellai Pukal and Bulbul, you will find that in Vellai Pukal, you have her father-in-law, Rudran, who's a police officer, given equal importance. So you have his own detective powers and you have the parallel narrative of Alice. You have two things happening at the same time. So man and woman given equal importance. Here, you have Dutt, playing a very important role in writing, a woman writing about a woman. So here the entire story evolves around only Bulbul, the way she handles justice in her own rights. And finally, in the forest, when her own brother-in-law shoots her, the doctor Sudeep, who has always been good to her, who nurses her feet, and who has a doubt that perhaps she is the so-called Chudail, he tells Satya, wo Chudail nahi, Devi hai. She's not a witch, she's a goddess because she's been protecting people. She's been protecting people. And finally, Satya, he commits something very stupid. He thinks she's really a Chudail and he sets fire to the forest, the land that she's been protecting, the land that she's been the guardian of. And she decides to sit on the tree and burn with the tree. And finally, Satya understands his mistake. He writes to his brother saying, I'm ashamed of you. I'm leaving this place because I don't want to be a perpetrator of violence like you. And when Indranil comes, she emerges from the fiery embers once again. And it quite indicates the fact that she's going to kill him. So this is the concept of woman again as Kali. So you have in these films, mostly in these films, you have the archetype of the woman as the fierce goddess. Now, Anvita Dutt is the person who actually wrote the screenplay of this. And you have the double standards in society, as I told you. Indranil can sleep with his brother's wife. For Binodini, it's okay. But when Satya or, Bulbul talk to each other, then that's wrong. So how different is it from other films? Here, this is one film where she comes back again. So the idea of reviving Bulbul, she rises from the dead again, meaning she is going to fight for the justice of women again. She becomes the living dead. She is going to fight again. So this is what it is. So this is what I want you to look at when you look at film narratives. I want you to look at how women are portrayed in films. See, because I'm not here to say that, all women should take up cudgels against men. They should all go about castrating men and killing men. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm only trying to show how justice takes on different forms. When a man meets justice, it's shown differently. And when a woman meets up justice, it's shown differently. So this is something you really need to take into account when you study film narrative. So these are some of the views. Actually, if you read Chanakya's Arthashastra, Chanakya distinguishes between justice and revenge. According to him, revenge is adharma. Justice is dharma. So he says you should not seek revenge because revenge is born out of hate and hate is born out of jealousy. That is his ideology. But not always is revenge born out of hate or jealousy. It is born out of anger. Anger that, injustice has prevailed and that law and order has not been instrumental in providing injustice. So these are some of the backlashes against revenge, because somewhere the balance has to be struck. In real life, if we go about taking revenge like this, then we will only give rise to anarchy. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'll be very happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really a wonderful deliberation. So we have a few questions that we can take it out now.
Sure.
It is from Ruma Guha. Do women only become revengeful after being tortured? Then what about Lady Macbeth, Anna Karenina? Maybe a bit out of their context she is telling. And women seeking judgment should be bloodthirsty.
See, that is not the way. Now, if you look at Lady Macbeth, there's always a question mark. She craves, she just asks for revenge, right? Who is the one seeking revenge? In fact, she's only a conspirator, right? Where is she taking revenge? In fact, if it's someone who's taking revenge, it is, Fleance, Banquo's son, and Macduff, whose family is killed. They join hands with Malcolm and Donalbain in taking revenge against Macbeth. So Lady Macbeth doesn't seek revenge, right? She only tries to kill Duncan in order to procure the throne for her husband, Macbeth. And there again, though she talks that I will even pluck out a child nursing at my breast and dash its brains to the ground, when it comes to real killing, is she the one who kills Duncan? She says, I went to kill him, but he resembled my father, so I couldn't kill him. When you can kill the child nursing at your breast, is it difficult to kill a man who's actually not your father, but someone who resembles your father? See, that's a big question mark regarding Lady Macbeth. She doesn't seek revenge. She only tries to indulge in conspiracy. So see, in most cases where you're a vigilante killer, there is some incident in your life, either your family is put at stake or you are raped. In most cases, that is what happened. I'm not saying that all women, I'm only looking at one particular genre, the rape revenge genre. I'm only looking at that. Now, for example, I gave you examples of Mangamma Sapadam. You have Engamma Sapadam. You have in 1985 Mangamma Sapadam again with Kamal Hassan in double roles, where, Mangamma, the part played by Sujatha, is to, bring her husband's killers to justice. So either something happens to the victim or the family of the victim. So not necessary that everybody has to be bloodthirsty, but in this genre, the rape revenge genre or the vigilante genre, usually that is the trend, particularly as far as film narrative is concerned. I'm focusing on film narrative. As far as the film narrative is concerned, this is the trend.
Yes, ma'am. An earlier question. Is it necessary that we must go through tortures or rapes, then rise from ashes and revenge? Or we should be trained intellectually to be in a system where women are respected?
Good question. Now, if you look at most literatures, for example, there is a film called Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon. In that, the princess seeks to actually, learn the art of Kung Fu on her own for self-defense. Okay. Now, if you look at the film, the Malayalam film, Puttur and Putri Unniyarcha. Unniyarcha is the warrior from Kadathanadu, from the house of Putturan. Okay. And right from childhood, she's trained. Now, if you look at the film Pattasu, which talks about Adimurai, the martial art, you have Sneha, the woman character who's also trained in Adimurai, who in fact, defeats the villain during one of the sessions. So you do have films like that. But again, I repeat what I'm trying to tell you. This is a different genre. The rape revenge genre or the vigilante genre is something which rises as a thirst for revenge because something has happened to the victim's family. I'm only discussing a genre. I'm not here to say that this is how it should be. I think I made it very clear in the webinar. I'm not here to proclaim that this is how it should be. I'm only discussing the structure of the genre. I'm only trying to bring about the changes, the evolution of the particular genre. Yes, please.
Yeah. With that reference, when you were speaking about the films, one participant also mentioned that there is a Malayalam film by name 22 Female Courtallam, where the heroine castrates her perpetrator. That she noted here.
Yes, Fahad Fasil. Yes. But that again becomes
another question, ma'am.
See, one more thing. The reason why I didn't take that is it becomes personal revenge. It's a personal vendetta. Yes. So that's why I didn't take that. That's what I told you. Even regarding Bandit Queen, there was a lot. You have too many critics discussing Poolan as a killer who really took revenge for personal reasons. That is why I didn't discuss Bandit Queen also. 22 Female Courtallam also does this. It's personal vendetta.
So one participant is asking, what is your personal view on revenge as a source of acquiring justice?
Well, there are different ways of taking revenge, right? You don't have to always take the knife. There are various other ways of taking revenge. Once when we attended a meeting by lawyers, okay, most of them were lawyers there. And the lawyers' wives were also there, and the people were supposed to talk openly. Okay, it was Valentine's Day, and they said on this day we are going to bring our wives and we are going to discuss openly about our mistakes and how to rectify them. So one of the lawyers said, I have a very nasty temper. I treat my wife badly when I'm angry. In the sense, I don't beat her or anything, but I hurl abuses, and I'm very sorry about it. And when she was asked to react, she said, are you feeling bad about it? There was the Chief Justice Swaminathan who was there. He asked, are you feeling bad about it? She said, no, I have my ways of taking revenge. And we all were surprised, because from a woman who looked so docile, so quiet, here was an answer. We asked her, how? She said, I hide some of his important files. I don't hide them in places where he may find them. I hide them in places where they can be obviously seen. because I know that it is the psychology of the human mind to look in places where they think it will be there, but they don't search in obvious places most of the time. So I would make him suffer a little before I hand it over to him. So he laughed. He said, so it was you all this while. And then he took a promise there. He said, I promise you, I will not do this hereafter. I will try to control my anger. And he was going for anger management classes and yoga and all that. Very soon, his wife started saying, look, even when I was not hiding, he started asking me, please don't hide. This is a very important file. Please don't hide. And things like that. So there are different ways of taking revenge. You can take revenge using silence. Some women take revenge using silence. For example, in the end, the Forest of Enchantments, Divakaruni talks about Ahalya. When Indra rapes Ahalya, or has sex with Ahalya under the guise of her husband Gautam Rishi curses her to be a stone when she had no axe to grind in the whole matter. So what happens when she is brought back to her former self? She says, I'm going to observe a vow of silence. But why is she observing a vow of silence? That is the best way of punishment. Keeping him away from all kinds of conversation. So you have different ways of revenge. I don't go always by the one that takes a sword, because it becomes a vicious cycle. There is no end to it then. That's why I put that quotation. You have to dig 2 graves then, one for yourself and one for the other person.
Okay, thank you. The next question. Does a woman come back to her normal psychological state after taking revenge? So do these films have a positive impact on the audience?
Well, it depends on what type of a person you are. Some of us, we start crying when we see something very emotional on the film. I am one such type. My mother gets very angry. She says, that is only a film. Can you please stop this melodrama here? I cannot take it. For me, see, when there is always a hope that somebody will always take justice. I do not look at it as a human being. I always see it from my point of view, I'm telling you. For me, it is symbolic. I always think that God will send someone to wreak vengeance. It is your karma. It will take form of some kind or the other to wreak vengeance. Even if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. What goes around comes around. This is my ideology. Some people who are extremely radical go by the idea that we should take law into our hands. And that is when you have violence breathing in society. There is no end to it then, as I told you.
So when you talk regarding the karma, so people have so much of connections with that. So if we hurt someone who hurt us, it is revenge. And if someone hurts the one who hurted us, it's karma. So one's revenge is another's one karma. She's questioning. It's a question from Manivan, I think so. And he's a bit confused with this concept.
See, because the whole
taking revenge.
See, if you look at any religion, for that matter of fact, you have a lot of inherent contradictions. Because we pass through so many ages, so many interpretations. So you cannot narrow it down. We can't have a freezing of meaning. We should have a free play of meaning. It is how you look at it. Whether you see it as dharma, whether you see it as karma, or whether you see it as adharma is in your perspective. I cannot give you a straight definition for that.
So another question, ma'am. What are the root causes for women torturing in the society, even though women played very beautiful roles in everyday life?
See, why are women being tortured? Again, there are so many reasons behind it. Number one, particularly when we deal with domestic violence in households. People who are subject to violence sometimes tend to reciprocate the violence on somebody else. They try to transfer those feelings of frustration on somebody else. In most cases, women who play the role of the mother-in-law or even the father-in-law, the man or the woman in families. Why do they inflict torture on the daughter-in-law? Why do they either hurl abuses or speak in a sarcastic tone or inflict violence? Because perhaps they are subject to it, or Let's say, for example, there was one case which once came to us when we were a part of an NGO. The mother-in-law came from a middle-class family. She was not very good looking. Her husband was crippled, and therefore they wanted a girl from a poor family who would marry such a person. And that is why she was married, okay, to that person from a rich family. Now, when she found her son fell in love and married a girl from a rich family who was extremely beautiful, who is extremely beautiful, she couldn't stand that girl. She tried to see every other reason to torture that girl, to speak in a very bad way and things like that. So, and she kept saying, do you know how much I suffered? Do you know how much I suffered? Do you know how I was treated? Look at the way I'm treating you. Look at the way you are behaving. Do you know how I behaved in front of my mother-in-law? So this is a kind of vicious cycle which takes place in most cases. And in some cases, when the perpetrator is also a man, you know, they take out their frustration on someone weaker than them. Obviously, physically, woman is weaker. So in most cases, this is one of the root causes of domestic violence. It is not just me that says this. DSM-5 also agrees with this. So, you know, these are the reasons. See, if everything is bright and rosy, then why is crime happening in the world?
Yes. Another participant have a question. Why do Indian parents love their sons more than their daughters? The daughters could give it their all, but sons are still pride and joy. Why?
Of course,
There's a
I'm the
question.
only
Yeah.
child of my parents, and you know, I have often been terribly irritated about the fact that whenever my mother's place is Shornur in Kerala, my father's from Vaikam. Now, in my mother's place, whenever my mother visited, I hated visiting that place for one reason only. Otherwise, I liked the place. Whenever relatives came, you know, well wishers, friends, family friends, and relatives came, God gave you only a daughter after all. If there had been a son, you know, things would have been fine with you. See, because society is basically patriarchal. Kerala was matriarchal, but gradually it moved to patriarchy. If you read Here Comes Papa, you will see the rise of patriarchy. It's a book on the rise of patriarchy in Kerala. So, in most cases, society is basically patriarchal. So, in such circumstances, obviously, the birth of a male child is considered, you know, a sign of good luck. And the birth of a female child is always considered bad luck. Because a daughter is always considered a burden. You have to give her money, you will have to give her dowry, you will have to, and when her child is born, when the child grows up, for everything, you know, she's sent to her parents' place to get something or the other. So obviously, parents consider the daughter a liability and a son an asset. But of course, things are changing. There are societies which are changing as well. There are so many families which want a daughter and not a son.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Another question from Sudita. Ma'am, is it only reason that rape what forced women to take revenge? What's your opinion on Mahabharata or on Draupadi about women's rights?
That's what I told you. That is not the only reason. I think I told you the reason. I said in Vigilante films, it's not just rape alone. I focused on the rape Vigilante films. But that is not the only reason. For example, if you look at the Tamil film Ramana, Vijayakant's family is completely destroyed because, you know, they construct building on loose soil. You know, they construct a building on loose soil and the building crumbles. And he loses his pregnant wife and his child. And that is when he decides to take revenge against society for whatever evil it is trying to perpetrate. So, not always is a vigilante film related to rape. I focused on rape as one of the reasons. See, for example, I told you about Mangama Sapadam, where Sujatha wants to take revenge for against Satyaraj, who kills her husband Kamal Hasan. And see, sometimes your dear and near are affected, or your friend is affected. You're taking revenge for that. So that's how it is.
related to that vigilant killer in films. Do you think the image of women as vigilant killers in films is a way of assertion of identity
Yes,
and rights of women in society?
definitely, no doubt about it. Definitely, no doubt about it. This is to show that woman has another side. As I told you, Ma Durga, Gauri, Parvati, Tanadayini, as she is called, the giver of divine milk. So you have on the one hand the gentle image of woman as Lakshmi, as Saraswati, as Gauri, as Parvati, as Vama Devi. You have all this. On the other hand, you have Chandika, you have Kali. Isn't it? Why do you have this dichotomy? To show that woman can sustain and woman can also destroy. Why? Even in the Panchakrityas of Lord Shiva, what is it? Srishti, creation, Sthiti, preservation, Samhara, destruction. His Damaru is the one from which creation abounds. The fire is the symbol of Samhara, isn't it? At the same time, the hand that is upraised also says, do not fear, I am there. Hope, Anugraha. So you have this dichotomy always. It is definitely to show that there is another identity which woman can ever have. And inside every woman, you have the Durga, the Parvati, and the Kali. And given an opportunity, any of these can rear its head. This is what they're trying to say. This is an identity, definitely. Depending on the circumstances, that particular identity rears its head.
We'll take few questions from the YouTube viewers also, ma'am.
Definitely.
Your viewers is, there is no change in the mindset of Indian society. How can we do it? Please suggest something.
Let me tell you something. We can't overgeneralize saying there is no change in the mindset. There is a positive change happening. I can, I don't know, I haven't got that link right now with me. One of my seniors who is with me in Etiraj College, Dr. Vidya Sarveshwaran, has done a short film where she talks about Rajasthan and where she talks about how, you know, they're planting trees and all that. And whenever there is a birth of a female child, they plant a tree, in order to show that a child is equally important in society. You know that Rajasthan is famous for, female infanticide. It is one of those states which is famous for female infanticide. But there is also a ray of hope. We can't overgeneralize. There is a lot of hope these days in society. These days, there are many families which want good daughters, which are very happy in having daughters. In fact, I have a friend of mine who is a retired school teacher. And this gentleman told me, you know, I want my son to have daughters because daughters will take good care of their parents, better care than even sons do. That was his ideology. I'm not here to say that, you know, all daughters are good and all sons are bad. No, that was his view. So there are so many families that say that daughters are better than sons. So there is a change happening. First of all, you know, in most, as one of the viewers rightly says, the media also indulges in this kind of negative backlash. There are so many films where they show a kind of a negative whiplash. They show the boy as being superior to the girl, and they also show families where the son is superior to the daughter, and they always show films where the daughter of the family is wicked and the son and his wife are good. There are so many films like that. So, you know, this mindset, particularly, I'm sorry to say, with all due respect to the small screen, I'm sorry to say that mega serials play a great deal of havoc. It's mostly the mother-in-law beating the daughter-in-law torturing the mother-in-law, and the man mostly has an affair, the woman has an affair. Sometimes, you know, I told my mother once, please switch off that nonsense. Please don't watch it. Some of them are good. A handful are very good. But most of them bring out this. They say, no, this is what happens in society. But please note, it's a vicious cycle. Why don't we bring about positive serials? This is when I stopped looking at all these serials, you know. As it is, I don't watch. I stopped completely. I started watching suspense thrillers and crime thriller fiction only, and reading and watching only because of this reason. You're right. Most of the havoc is done by the media also. I have to accept.
Yes, ma'am. Another question. Where do you place Sita? She did take revenge by not returning back. Hope I'm right. Viewer is asking.
See, that as I told you, revenge has different forms. Yes. You don't have to always take a sword or a knife or a gun. An AK-47 is or a pistol is not the solution. You must read Sita's Sister by Kavita Kani. You must read The Forest of Enchantment. You must read Sita, and you must read Devdutt Patnaik's Sita. You must read these different versions. In all these versions, this is the idea presented. When Ram says, once again, you must take the Agni Pariksha, she says, no, I can't do it again. Why should I? If I do it, it will reflect upon all women in society that they have to justify themselves at every step. And she says, I will not do it. And that is when she returns to her roots, the earth. So definitely it is one form of revenge. I agree with you. It is one form of revenge. Again, it depends on your perspective. In Forest of Enchantments, she looks at him and says, I forgive you. Please note, because when you love someone so much, you should forgive them. That was one part I couldn't digest, of course, because if I were in her place, I don't know if I would have said the same thing. So each one's way of taking revenge is different, as I told you. For some, it's silence. For some, it's non-conformity. In Sita's case, it's non-conformity.
Yes. So one participant is asking, can you explain new women concept regarding this connected? New women concept.
The new woman or the new generation concept, it is fluid. You cannot, freeze or stabilize the concept of a new woman. Now, there was a new interpretation given to this Sanskrit proverb by a Telugu writer. Karyeshu dasi, karaneshu mantri, bhojeshu mata, shayaneshu ramba, Rupeshu Lakshmi, Shameshu Dhatri, Shatdharma Yukta, Kuladharma Patni. The actual meaning is she should work for you like a maid, she should counsel you like a minister, she should feed you like a mother, and she should please you in bed like Ramba, the courtesan. She should be as beautiful as Lakshmi, and she should be as patient as Dhatri, the earth. A woman who's endowed with these Shat Dharma Yukta, a woman who's endowed with these 6 gunas, or dharmas, requirements, is the real Kula Dharma Patni, the embodiment of a true woman. You have the same embodied also in MGR's films, Raman Thediya Sita. See, a reinterpretation, Karyeshu Dasi, a person who is, clever enough to take care of her own tasks, who's self-reliant. Karaneshu Mantri, a person who counsels her husband, who advises, a person who suggests, to her better half on how things should be done. Bhojeshu Mata. Now, Bhojeshu Mata, again, the person who sustains her family. It doesn't mean the person who cooks for the family alone. The person who joins hands with her husband in sustaining the family. Shayaneshu Ramba, the person who not only pleases her husband, but who also makes sure that she is pleased. Until 50 years ago, 5 decades ago, woman's orgasm was never taken into account. Woman's satisfaction was never taken into account. It was later on psychiatry that looked into it and brought it into progress. So, Shayaneshu Ramba, woman who satisfies her husband and also makes sure she is satisfied. Rupeshu Lakshmi, a woman who looks pleasing. She doesn't have to be Aishwarya Rai or Sunny Leon or, Mamta Kulkarni. So it is not like that. So a woman who is beautiful in the eyes of her husband and who views her husband as handsome in her eyes. I think that is what really matters. See, when you try to, when you feel that you are good to yourself and you're good in the eyes of your dear Anna, that's more than enough. You don't have to go for this exhibition culture at all. Shame Shudatri, a person who doesn't have to be docile and keep her mouth shut for all injustice. That's not the meaning. A person who handles situations with a cool head. If you have these 6 qualities, you are really the ideal woman of today.
Yes, we will take one or two questions. One question from the YouTube. The most silenced character in Ramayana is Urmila. Can we say that she was able to take revenge for her state of being neglected by her husband and the family?
Now, you must, Maithili Sharan Gupta, the Hindi poet, he wrote a kavya only on Urmila. See, this is precisely why mythic retellings are focusing on those women who have been marginalized in myths. For example, Kavita Kane is a mythic fiction writer. If you read Sita's sister, she focuses largely on Urmila. Okay, she focuses largely on Urmila. She focuses on her as the center and on how she counsels Lakshmana on how to behave. See, this is the whole idea of mythic retelling. They choose only those women characters who have never been mentioned in any kavya or who have been mentioned in a very, meager way, in a very minor way. So definitely, this is precisely why you have feminist mythopoeia coming, mythic retellings coming about.
Okay, thank you. One participant, Ram Shankar, so he has just conveyed his views regarding the 21st century. Always you people talk about the women. We are in 21st century, but yet men are compelled to earn their livelihood. And when this trend will change, and when will men take rest in the house, and ladies will earn the livelihood, madam?
There are so many cultures where women go out to earn, where men take care of the families. See, for example, let me give you one example. In Saudi Arabia, I have many colleagues of mine whose husbands don't do any work. Okay? As far as my case is concerned, I have many friends of mine whose husbands are not working. Okay, they stay at home to take care of the children. They do active parenting. They do very good parenting, and their wives are employed at the university. So don't think that this is not existent in society. Don't think this doesn't exist in society. It does exist in society. And there's a friend of mine who says that in Meghalaya, the man leaves his parents to stay with his wife. Even in Kirakarai, among the Kirakarai Muslims, the man comes to his wife's place after marriage. This is there even in Tamil Nadu, in Kirakarai, among the Kirakarai Muslims.
Okay, ma'am. With that, we will wind up the session because more questions are coming, but due to time constraint, we will end the session, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Fascist feminism. What you mean by any form of fascism is never appreciable. That is my ideology. And I think that is what most people also talk about. No form of fascism can be applicable in society because it takes an extreme step. So as far as practical societal living is concerned, no form of fascism is applicable. You can have this in literature, where as I told you on screen, where you are in a willing suspension of disbelief, but definitely not in real life. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy for all your feedback. Thank you very much.
Getting so many wonderful feedbacks, ma'am, from both the sides, Zoom and YouTube. So for your wonderful deliberation of the Sanskrit verses, so one participant has given her appreciation. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us. And it was really a wonderful session. And we could see that how energetic you are presenting throughout, right from the beginning till the end. I could see the energy, how active you were in your deliberation. Really wonderful to listen to you. It was completely a visual treat. So feel narrative with a visual treat to talk to you, ma'am. We enjoyed the session a lot, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks to Parasakthi College, thanks to the management, thanks to the Department of English, thanks particularly to Dr. Karthika. When I told her, look, I'm no longer international, I've become local because I'm coming back to India to be with family finally. And she said, no, ma'am, I'm not interested in whether you're local or international. I want you to come. Thank you very much, Dr. Karthika. She's been in constant touch with me regarding this. And thanks to every one of you. I bow down to every one of you because it's not easy to stay rooted for 3 hours and to listen to people speaking. Thank you very much. Hats off to every one of you. And thank you very much for taking this time to listen to me. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Participants, kind announcements to the participants. Now we will post the feedback and the attendance